almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains,
And we're back.
Shenandoah River.
Hello.
Life is on the
You are listening to the Infinite Scale Podcast Network on one July 13th, 2020. This is a special occasion.
Yeah, because we played Fallout 76.
No, that is the least special of occasions. That is a crime, actually. This is a special occasion because, well, as always, I'm joined by Sean Peterson, and of course, I am William Chandler. But this is a special occasion because we have a guest. This is our first guest, and we're very excited to welcome one Bipol Alam to the podcast. Please say hello.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm honored to be here. I feel bad. I'm currently looking at a blog post about how to be a great podcast guest, and I can tell you I've done none of these preparation bits.
Okay, all right. What's
that are required.
just hit me with some of the list. What are we talking about here?
Listen to at least 2 full episodes.
Okay, all right. We're gonna assume 0 on that.
Yeah, I've never listened to it. Note any consistent segments or bits the show uses, and that's
Okay.
sort of like predicated on the first one, which I
that's
haven't
correct.
done.
Yeah, that should have been a
read-
1A really, or 1B.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to be ready for when we quiz him about Fallout.
Oh yeah.
Mm.
Read the reviews of the podcast.
Hmm.
I guess I could just ask, what are the current reviews of the podcast?
The current reviews are that about 5 people have listened to this, and I assume we personally know at least 3 of them. So
Nice. And any feedback on that?
the feedback, one person who we know from our hometown, who I will not say right now, said that it sounded pretty good. So
Give me a sense of this character so I can have a better understanding of what the audience is.
so other than well, okay. So our audience is 50-50 male and female, which is interesting. And they're all between the ages of 24 and 30.
Okay.
You
Interesting.
got the
And
millennial
let me
audience.
tell you, well, at least one person, I didn't look at the stats for every episode, but at least one person who listened to one of our previous episodes was from Canada, and I don't know who that would be. So
Interesting. Okay.
yeah. So welcome,
And
Canadians,
thank you, and-
one and all.
Yeah. Welcome all parts of Canada.
Mhm.
And then the last bit of advice this blog post is giving me is to prepare at least 3 stories you can unfurl at any time.
All right, hit me. What's your first story?
Well, that's the problem is I don't have any stories to unfurl. I have
Great.
nothing prepared.
Great.
Um,
It's a good thing that you're as unprepared as we are.
Yeah. We'll see where this goes.
Yeah. We take things one by the minute here. So
What minute are we on?
we are on minute. Well, I started recording slightly before I actually introduced us, but so we're probably on minute like 3 here. So yeah. So minute 4 is looking like it's going to be a good one, though. I
Yeah.
will say. And the reason that is the case is because we're going to talk about the one Ubisoft Forward event that happened really quickly, I think. Because there's not really a lot to talk about. Quick, just what do you guys think about Ubisoft?
I like Rainbow Six Siege.
Nice.
I've never played an Assassin's Creed game, and I've never played a Far Cry game.
Wait, actually never?
Never.
How did you end up on a video game podcast?
You should ask yourself that.
Yeah, it's because I didn't know anybody else. Okay. B-Paul, any hot Ubisoft takes here?
Yeah. I'm currently looking through their. I'll be honest. It's not a discography. What would I call a list of games?
A gameography.
Their ludography. And I guess I should have been aware, but they published Just Dance.
That's
huge
correct.
hit.
Yep,
Huge
that's
hit.
correct.
Prince of Persia.
Yep.
Big fan. Even
Yep.
even the reboot that no one liked with Ella.
Yeah,
I have
with-
played.
was
I
that
have
Nolan
played
North?
Prince of Persia.
Which one?
Probably.
Which Prince of Persia did you play?
It was on the PSP.
Oh wow.
That is not what I
There-
expected that answer to
there's-
be.
Probably like a Sand of Time reboot on the PSP. I would not be surprised. But I'm talking about the PS3
Yeah.
Prince of Persia 2008
Yes,
video
correct.
game right there.
I tried to play that on the PC, and it did
Oh,
not.
I had no idea.
It didn't really work that well. It was kind of a weird game, especially if you wanted to connect a controller to your Steam. At that point in time, if you wanted to connect a controller to a PC, it was a 50-50 shot about whether it worked at all, which is super fun. Yeah.
But yeah, Assassin's Creed. I've played a few of them. Assassin's Creed, the original trailer, the E3 announcement is still in my mind. I definitely remember that. That was a big moment. I thought just in terms of the tech demo, it was very impressive. Far Cry, same thing, right? I played the original Far Cry on PC.
Yeah.
And man, what a different that game between Far Cry 1 and Far Cry 3, each of those games so drastically different from the last.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
but-
and that was something that, I mean, Crytek developed Far Cry 1 and just published it through Ubisoft, and then basically sold off, or more accurately said, they weren't interested in making more Far Cry games, right? And Ubisoft just ran with it, and then Crysis kind of came out and was the Far Cry 2, really. But
I honestly was not aware of that, but that makes a ton of sense. But yeah, so I haven't been a recent fan of the Far Cry series. I definitely picked them up and play through them just to get a taste of it. But I generally am not a fan of the game loops in Assassin's Creed or Far Cry or any of that. It's just a little too monotonous for me, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Well, what if I told you that everything you loved about old Ubisoft games is permanently dead and gone?
Okay.
And that they are continuing down this path. And honestly, I this is like kind of all a meme. I don't think modern Ubisoft like open world games are like bad per se, but I agree is that they're very repetitive, right? And I don't enjoy that gameplay loop. But they are making another Assassin's Creed. I don't think that comes as a surprise to anyone. And this presentation, like, we didn't watch the pre-show, but we tuned in for the kind of the hour-long event proper, and they had not a lot. Like, it was the usual suspects. You didn't have to watch it to really know what Ubisoft was going to announce. Like, that's just true. Like, they announced, they have previously announced, and they kind of elaborated further upon the Assassin's Creed game that is coming out later this year, as well as the Watch Dogs game, which is coming out later this year, and then the Far Cry. They officially announced the Far Cry game that leaked kind of earlier in the week. Unfortunately for them, because that was kind of their big ending note. They presented it in the presentation. I assume they didn't have time to re-edit this thing. Well, I don't even think I need to say assume. So let's start at the beginning. You guys, I assume, saw the like kind of problematic allegations against Ubisoft that were discussed pretty highly earlier this week /
No.
last week. Okay.
Yeah, didn't
No.
they put out a thing after the presentation too? Because people felt like they weren't addressing it or something.
I please, if you could cover this, I actually don't know what you're talking about.
Totally. So, basically, I mean, the So the Me Too movement is sweeping the entire games industry, not just like studios and developers and, but Twitch is going through a massive kind of, coming out of people revealing, horrible shit that has happened to them. And at the hands of different people in the industry, right? So in this case, Ubisoft sort of realized pretty late in the game, and I say realized very charitably because there is absolutely no way that something this large was not previously known to leadership there. So, I mean, this is kind of a weird gray area, but basically there was a large number of complaints leveled at senior officials and folks working at Ubisoft in different studios at different capacities that basically, showed a systemic problem in terms of like harassment, sexual and non, just like being horrible to people who work under you. That kind of just shows a trend of like a problematic work environment and culture at this company. In a way that like Yves Guillemot, like the head of Ubisoft, came out and was like put out a letter where they were, they dismissed at least a dozen people, it seems like, at that company, and some, well, I say dismissed, some resigned of their own accord, some were fired or whatever. They don't get into a ton of detail, I assume for legal reasons, of course, but there's a lot of weird shit going on at Ubisoft at the exact I mean, it's the right time for people who worked at that company and didn't feel safe, but it's the wrong time for Ubisoft as a brand because this happened, and then they put out a statement right before their E3, the Ubisoft Forward thing, that said, hey, this video has been in production for a month or more. We didn't have time to edit and address the allegations in our conference. So basically, like, they put out a statement in advance saying the conference itself is not going to reference anything that's happening or any changes we're making or whatever. But yeah, that stuff is they're dedicated to kind of cleaning house in that regard. Yeah. So that's kind of the short version. It's a lot, and I mean, I haven't stayed apprised of everything because there's constantly things coming out about different people. I know the one major kind of linchpin to this whole thing was the director of Assassin's Creed Origins, which is a game that people really like, and he was coming back to direct, I believe, Valhalla. He left the company after it was revealed that he was having pretty extensive and numerous affairs, extramarital affairs, things like that. So, yeah. But so the shadow of all of this stuff kind of was hanging over this press conference in a way, and it definitely, colored, I think, how people felt about this thing a little bit. For sure.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Like, it's certainly difficult to see how they're going to approach these serious allegations.
Yeah.
And it is sort of, even though I haven't watched this, it does seem pretty tone deaf to maybe not try to seriously address the allegations first.
Yeah.
I understand, like, business is business, but in a time like this where these things should be taken more seriously than anything else, especially in our world right now, given the pandemic and all of these other stressful, terrible things. Yeah, I don't know.
No, I totally. And I mean, I think a lot of people echo your sentiments, right? Like, there was a big, like, they put out that statement that they weren't going to be able to address it in the video, maybe a couple of hours before the broadcast, and people were immediately not on board with that. Like, I mean, they've definitely been taking action already. I mean, they've seen to the investigation and dismissal and whatever of employees who were responsible or maybe knew of and prevented the proper kind of recourse. But yeah, I mean, it definitely is tone deaf for them to not at least try to whip together some kind of lead in for this stuff in this video, in this broadcast. But I mean, it's only one piece of the puzzle, of course. I mean, if they go forward and take this stuff seriously and do everything they can, then I mean that's the best positive outcome, right? But
do you think that if this was taking place at E3 in front of an audience, that they would have whipped up something to happen before the presentation?
Yeah, I think that if this was a live production and they intended to kind of have somebody speak, they would have, some poor unpaid.
Somebody could have done that quickly.
Yeah, some poor underpaid person would have been forced to write a quick speech that handled, and addressed this.
I recently watched Blizzard's Shadowlands presentation.
I actually did not watch that.
On some content. They've been releasing kind of developer logs, and this of course is a different situation, but they had someone, although in an awkward fashion, address a lot of I guess Blizzard, or at least the developer side, feelings over the Black Lives Matter movement and their support for it. So I think no matter what, a corporation can still put a human face and time around addressing these sorts of things.
Yeah.
And I think as you've kind of drawn this, the shadow that loomed over their conference, and now everyone is waiting to hear how they're going to address this. We're all waiting for this response. It almost, I feel like, puts more pressure on Ubisoft in the end. Mm-hmm. So I don't know.
Yeah, totally. But the show went on, and I mean, it's always an awkward pivot, but to talk about video game news after addressing something that is definitely, more goes above and beyond. That's something that affects people's lives, and to pivot into product entertainment is always awkward. But yeah, I mean, this is so kind of, that's just setting the backdrop, and then the show itself. I mean, even regardless of that stuff, it's hard not to feel disappointed by what they're presenting. I mean, Sean's right. Rainbow Six Siege is a great video game. There have been some great games in the past of Ubisoft, Prince of Persia's of the world, and which is a franchise that deserves to be brought back, I think, in some capacity. But so this thing sort of felt pretty lackluster. They talked about Ubisoft has a new battle royale game that this is fucking hilarious, but I do not even remember the name of it. It's some cyberpunk battle royale thing.
Hyperscape. Hyperplane? Hyperscape?
I think Hyperscape is right. I'm gonna Google it.
Hyperscape is right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. They have a battle royale thingy that they kind of went over that is already out there. They released it as a closed beta on Twitch about a week or so ago, and they announced that it is now in open beta, and people can download and try that out for themselves, which I think we may try at some point. I don't know if that's of any interest to you guys, but I get the feeling that at some point someone in our friend group will go, hey, we should fucking maybe play this thing, and then that happens. And then I think the really big stuff was they covered Assassin's Creed Valhalla in pretty great depth at this presentation. It's a Viking themed Assassin's Creed game, and it follows in the footsteps of Odyssey and Origins in terms of gameplay, but it seems to have refined combat and systems in a way that makes it more that game that they were shooting for, which is basically like open world RPG, kind of Dark Soulsy combat. Like they seem to have really leaned into that this time around, in a way that makes it seem actually kind of appealing to me. Like it felt like Origins and Odyssey was sort of splitting the difference a little more, and now they're just like, yeah, I mean, you can be stealthy if you want, but you could also just fucking ride a long ship of Vikings down the English coastline and then raid a village also, which seems kind of fun. But I don't know if you...
I think...
Go ahead.
I'm always suckered into Assassin's Creed because of that sort of that every trailer I watch, it just looks so like visceral and engaging and beautiful, and I'm always suckered in to go into the world. And like even with Odyssey, it's for me, a person who's played like 5 hours of that, so I can't speak deeply about it. Yeah. I mean, it was incredibly beautiful. There were so many interesting things going on. Like it's something that does tap some part of me that wants to explore, but whenever it's just the reinforced by the gameplay of constantly going to these points and killing these people, or doing that over and over again, just grates on me, where looking at the map is almost horrific, because there's just almost too much for me to do.
Yeah.
I almost wish that they would like cut everything down into like a much shorter game than this like super huge, engaging quote unquote world. Because every time I look at it, I'm like, yeah, that looks like something I'd want to play, but it never is.
Yeah. Sean expressed some interest in this, at least thematically, I know.
Yeah, I was gonna ask the dumb question of like because I didn't really see any of this in the trailer, but at what point does the stuff that I know of Assassin's Creed play into this? Because I saw some of like the weird like digital shit going on and some other footage, but like it seemed for the most part like just a Viking game, which is probably why I thought it looked really interesting. Yeah, I guess I don't understand how those worlds connect, but that makes sense since I haven't played the game.
Yeah, it certainly will influence the game. I'm sure. Like even in Odyssey, I don't believe that they showed too much content of, the modern era. In those trailers, because they want to highlight the world that they're building. But of course, the story. I wish we had Tristan Tran here, because he played all the games and knows the story pretty well. But I'm sure the underpinning is inside of Valhalla somewhere.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that, I mean, they've seemed to lay less and less emphasis on the present day, finger quotes because it's in the future, but on the present day aspects of Assassin's Creed, with each installment. Like they seem less interested, less invested on a narrative standpoint with that stuff, which is a shame, because I think in the original games it provided some intrigue, and they just kind of let that go to waste. I mean, the end of the Desmond story was pretty disappointing, I think, for most people. But yeah, they've sort of left that alone, or had it minimized over the years, and it's sort of just a weird backdrop to everything that's happening, which, whatever. I mean, I think most people are interested in the weird settings and more interesting kind of a directly, historical assassin stuff that they're doing. But yeah, I mean, I guess to answer your question, Sean, it doesn't relate that much. I mean, the gameplay of these newer Assassin's Creed games is almost nothing like the games that I think I preferred personally, but I understand why people thought that those were uninteresting as well. Like I really liked Assassin's Creed 2 is still the best game to me. which is not an unpopular opinion, I think.
I've
but
heard that before.
yeah, I think that's probably just the high point of the series, and they've kind of struggled to recapture that magic time and time again. I actually really liked Unity overall. It just, I think the story of that shit is really bad, but the gameplay was something that I thought was cool and was a good middle ground. But that game sold and had such poor word of mouth that, like, I think just they felt like reinventing it for Origins. But yeah.
This is a phrase that's been thrown around a lot lately, but do you feel like this is a mono-genre kind of situation? Do you think that Assassin's Creed is just starting to morph into being like a bunch of other games? Because even watching this, I mean, this is a super ignorant perspective, but I mean, it felt like I was watching something between The Witcher 3 and Dark Souls at times. Is just very, it just didn't seem like what I remember about Assassin's Creed. I don't know if that's like a mono genre kind of thing, or
yeah, I mean, everything is an RPG now. So I mean, that's just the reality of the world, of the market, right? Everything is a little bit of an RPG, and they've been pretty like wholesale about the things that they want to bring over. Like, they have gear scores in Assassin's Creed games now. They have, I mean, like, numbers fly off of people when you hit them. I think you can disable that in the options, but I'm pretty sure by default numbers fly off of people when you hit them. Like,
yeah,
there's been some pushback about that a little bit from people like me who like the older games. But I'm curious to see how much of that stuff, like, is this game going to be a little bit of a middle ground? I know somebody said at some point that the hidden blade will be a one-hit kill again, regardless of damage numbers, which is interesting. Like, that could be cool.
I guess,
but
yeah. Sorry to interject.
No.
I guess that's sort of my point. That's what I think that's what I want out of the game, is revisiting the earlier versions as you've described, because I think I agree, like, Assassin's Creed 2 is the Assassin's Creed that I want. So when I was like, if they could just cut it down and like make it shorter and make it less of this huge engaging world with side quests and equipment and, like you said, gear score and things like that, like, that's what I actually want from the game, is to engage in this system that they've built, this like beautiful world that they've worked in. But I don't want to have to worry about grinding to get the next new spear. I want them to guide me along the story because I'm a casual gamer. But
yeah, I mean, yeah, we're adults now, right? We don't have like a fucking 100 hours to devote to a mediocre story that the gameplay doesn't maybe fully work in service of. So
yeah, that's why they give us the option to invest in some Uplay coins, to buy the experience packs or what have you.
Yeah. I think I think the game you're looking for is just Prince of Persia.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Well, when they follow that game up, it'll also be an open world game where you have to grind for weapons.
Yeah. And they replace Nolan North with Troy Baker this time.
I just, every time I play these AAA, like, massive games that they hide with small bits of, I don't know, dark patterns around, what's the word for the upgrades, like the stores and things like that. They're building these systems which support the fact that people are going to want to play like me. I want the shortcuts. I want to get around the grinding. And it's those sorts of dark patterns that I, like, do not want in the video games I'm buying.
Yeah, they maybe if you have more disposable income than you have time, you invest in some microtransactions or something like that.
Yeah, that's the word I just for whatever reason could not remember, but microtransactions, like, that I am super incentivized to pay for. And that's why it's like the games that I'm looking forward to really are the cyberpunks of the world, where that they've already built up too much of an identity to ever introduce something like that, something that's sort of manipulative to the player. But
yeah, well, which is an example of another game that's extremely long, right? But in this case, I feel like the narrative and the gameplay and the systems invite that kind of complexity. Like you can just kind of take it a day at a time, and you're getting, you know, pieces of story both from the kind of plot of the game as well as like your own character's story as you push through it, right? Like kind of like The Witcher. Like that game was long and could be seen as repetitive, but everything felt like it was working towards a greater goal. That served the writing of the game, I guess. But
that game also kind of feels, and this is like sort of rare these days, is that feels like it's by design. It doesn't feel like it was like added on because a game needs to have that now.
Yeah.
It just kind of felt like, because we've known about Cyberpunk for quite a while, and that was always going to be part of it.
Yeah.
I'm curious about that description of, you know, it feels like this is something Geralt would do or has to do, and how the missions and side quests support those motives. And I wonder if it's just my own like bias from being sort of a Witcher fanboy that allows me to dive into that more easily than Assassin's Creed. But every time I play Assassin's Creed and I see a mission, I just kind of want to get through it as quickly as possible to try to find whatever bits I'm looking for, but I'm not even sure what those bits are.
Yeah.
So it definitely could be biased. Like maybe, as Sean pointed out, like from his view of what Assassin's Creed Valhalla is, it's like a weird Dark Souls / Witcher look, and I'm watching the trailer right now, and it definitely evokes that same identity.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure what parts of these new games that why I associate this with such grindiness when I can easily play Witcher for hours and hours. Like I have like 400 hours in Witcher 3 or something.
That's why I mentioned like the mono genre thing, because even though I said Dark Souls or Witcher, I mean, even looking at this, like I don't know if those are exactly what it is, but I guess the general thing that I feel is that a lot of games that previously had a different kind of look in my mind from what I knew of them a lot of games are starting to look similar, like in just like clips of them like this, you know. Not that they're necessarily just like The Witcher or Dark Souls, but it's just everything kind of seems to, I don't know, it's starting to like blur together a little bit. Yeah. Action games in general.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's intentional on the parts of developers. Like they're definitely realizing what players like from, you know, trends of sales in modern games, and then attempting to adapt those things into their own franchises. So I think that's definitely intentional. I think probably the last thing I'll say on this is just like the one thing I am happy to see, which I don't think was really that common in other Assassin's Creed games, was they're leaning into horrific violence in a way that really surprised me. Like you can fully
very comical gore in this.
Yeah, lots and lots of really vibrant blood, and you can dismember people like fucking like it's nothing in this game, which I think I'm an insane person. This makes me come across as the weirdest individual, but that makes me curious about it. Because I mean that shit is fucking fun. Cutting somebody's arm off is cool as hell, okay? I think we can all agree. I mean, come on, guys.
Were the other Assassin's Creed games not like that?
I feel like Odyssey had a level of gore, but I can't remember exactly.
I didn't play a lot of Odyssey. I played Origins, and there's always been, you know, violence, obviously. I mean, it's about assassinating people, but dismemberment is something that I don't recall being that common in Assassin's Creed games.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm with you on it in the sense that like there's like kind of this, you're either like not doing it at all, like Dark Souls, where you really don't have it at all, or you're just kind of doing something like, I guess, I mean, The Last of Us is pretty gory, but I think that when a game like takes it completely over the top, the way that this one is, where it's like shit that I don't know, like how you could even do this, but that's when it becomes kind of funny to me, because it's like it's completely unrealistic, but it's very visually entertaining.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. This looks more this definitely looks like they're not leaning as much on realism in any sense of the word. Like they seem to be like you're cutting somebody's entire head off with like a single sword swing. Like it definitely it's got Witcher 3 levels of horrific violence, but yeah. So quickly, I think I'll just mention this, but they talked a lot more about Watch Dogs Legion, which is the third Watch Dogs game, which they're kind of continuing the tone of Watch Dogs 2, which I did not play. Unfortunately, I've owned it since maybe shortly after it came out and have never played it because I always intended to play the first one through and then play the second one and just did not. So, but they are definitely leaning more heavily into the silliness of Watch Dogs 2, it seems, like the kind of capery, like, haha, we're a gang of people doing things mentality that is Watch Dogs 2 versus the I'm tech Batman of Watch Dogs 1. But I think the leading feature that they really showed off in this presentation is that in Watch Dogs 3, there is no protagonist. Like, there is no set main character. You can just play as whichever random NPC you want to recruit. And that each NPC has unique abilities, and they're suited to different missions, and you're encouraged to switch between them depending on what you have to do, and each mission will play out differently depending on the character that you pick and what their skills are. And for somebody who did not especially love Watch Dogs 1 and didn't play Watch Dogs 2, this has me slightly interested.
It definitely seems like a risk to me.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely interested. I remember, I think when they first announced Legion, I mean, that's kind of the gimmick. And I do remember hearing about that, but I'm curious to watch, I guess, whatever gameplay they've added or whatever content they've added since Ubisoft Forward. But
yeah,
I think it's going to serve the game more than hinder it, because I feel like they've been really bad at building characters, protagonists. Like Watch Dogs 2 guy was really cool. Watch Dogs 1 guy was bland and boring. So just because of that hit and miss, now they're completely depriving that from being, having like a central protagonist from being a part of the story and the plot. I'm curious what that means.
It's kind of interesting that you would go from having such a negative reception to like your main story character, and then the decision isn't to try and make stronger characters, but to just abandon that entirely and have there be multiple characters. I don't know how I feel about that. Not in terms of their execution, because obviously the game isn't out yet, but like I also didn't play Watch Dogs 2, so I don't know. I've never liked that stuff on a surface level. Like I didn't love it with GTA 5, which is probably a controversial thing to say, but I'm sure it could be interesting. Like having multiple.
Oh, I see.
I mean, like having multiple. I mean, that's a different situation because each of those characters have like a story. And I'm sure that there is some of that with this too. But I don't know. It doesn't work for me as often as having like just like a strong central character, or like two characters, like in the case of The Last of Us.
I just feel like it would be so jarring to, I mean, it's an Ubisoft game, so I'm assuming the game loops are going to be repetitive, and choosing a character who happens to have the same voice of a character you just had like 4 characters ago, like those are things that I would hone in on and be annoyed by, I think. And I guarantee it's going to happen at some point. In the way that they've described this game, at least. But
yeah,
that's kind of a nitpick.
It's interesting. So I guess 2 things. One is people really liked Watch Dogs 2, it seemed like gameplay wise, story wise, character, like main character wise, people seem to really like that game. I don't know that it sold that well. I don't have those figures in front of me, but like I maybe that's why they're taking this route, or they just had an idea and ran with it. But I don't think they were depriving themselves of a main character as a like attempt to fix something that was completely broken. I think Ubisoft games have always been written pretty sloppily, but it seemed like people really did enjoy the Watch Dogs 2 cast of characters, and especially enjoyed, the diversity of like having a black main character in Watch Dogs 2, and like he seemed to be written pretty well from things that I've heard. So it's interesting to see them taking this route, because yeah, I mean, I'm curious if it's like them trying to just remove that problem, or like if they're adding the extra layer on top of that of having an even harder problem, because then you have to make every cutscene read with like 300 different versions of the same line of dialogue, and is that going to be interesting or whatever? But and then yeah, to Watch Dogs Legion, I mean, this how much of a story game is this? Like does this shift indicate that they are putting less emphasis on the narrative and more emphasis on the gameplay? Is that the idea? Because if that's the case, then fine, and maybe things will be more enjoyable or less repetitive because of it. I don't know that that's true. If anything, it kind of almost makes me think of like MMO design, where it's just going to be more generic and more repetitive, because now they have to kind of design these missions around having any character. But I don't know.
Yeah, that's I suppose that's my fear, is that it's going to capture kind of the worst of all of these mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
But that, I mean, they've made this decision. They've worked pretty hard on developing a system that works around that concept. I mean, the game is called Legion. They must have approached these, what I'm saying is a flaw, hopefully, and have addressed them. But I'm definitely curious. I'm excited to see exactly what this means and how this plays out.
Yeah. I might play this game.
Yeah.
For sure. And then I guess lastly, they showed like a brief trailer of Far Cry 6.
Is that the teaser, or
so
more than that?
It seemed like they had two back to back. So they had one that played out like a almost like a True Detective intro sequence with like some music and heavy kind of graphical effects, like weird colored background, blurry, like
just objects floating around.
Yeah, objects like floating through kind of the camera space. And then they had like what was essentially like a full story trailer, like a CG trailer that was like, I don't know, what, a few, maybe 3 to 5 minutes long, of Giancarlo Esposito, like, pontificating about being the dictator of a country, basically.
El Presidente.
Yeah. And
I love that he's in more things now.
As spoken as somebody who has never watched Breaking Bad, I know nothing about him, but he seems like
he's the best part of Breaking Bad.
Yeah, I could believe that. I mean, he seems pretty cool in this trailer. The character stuff seems interesting. Like this, if there's one thing Far Cry has always gotten well, with maybe the exception of Far Cry 5, which was kind of a little bit more generic, they've always gotten their villains pretty well.
Yeah.
So, but they didn't show gameplay.
Is this like canonically? Is this like? Is this more of an anthology type of thing, or is this like an actual direct sequel story-wise to the last game?
So every game takes place in a different location, and the times jump around a lot. So this game seems like it's present-ish day. There are cell phones and technology and stuff like that, but they don't really get into any type of connectivity between games really ever, at all. Like Far Cry 5, I mean, I'm spoilers. If you skip like 10 minutes ahead if you don't want to know what happens at the end of Far Cry 5, because it's actually probably the only skip? Yeah. Do you actually not want to know?
No, please.
Like Far Cry 5, the only interesting thing in that entire game is that the end of that game proves that the villain was right. Like, he's a religious zealot who lives in Montana and believes that the world is coming to an end, and then it's true. Like, the ending of that game is a nuke going off and the world ending. Which is fascinating. Like, that is the only interesting part of that game. And obviously this can't be a sequel to that because the world ended. They already made a sequel to that, actually. They made Far Cry Primal. Or no, Far Cry Primal was the prequel that was set at fucking 0 BC. What was the shit? I don't remember what the last Far Cry game was called, but it was a post-apocalyptic, like Rage 2 looking fucking, I don't know, post-apocalypse weird people being dicks to each other and maybe cannibals, and I don't know.
It had like a Borderlands vibe to it, right?
Yeah, but
kind of
not even really. I mean, not even really. It wasn't even as silly as that. It was like splitting the difference. Yeah, New Dawn. There you go. Yeah, which I did not play that game because that just didn't interest me at all because it was the same setting. It took place in Montana just like Far Cry 5 did.
Yeah. I mean, they always do those kind of spin-offs with the same assets, but slightly different. Blood Dragon is the one I always think of, which is cool.
I realized that I have played one Far Cry game. It was Blood Dragon,
which is a pretty fun game, I think.
Yeah.
And it's short. Like, it's exactly what Bipol was talking about, which is like it's a pretty tight experience. Like, you could play through that whole thing in like 10 hours. But yeah, so I mean, I'll be interested to see if they're making any changes gameplay wise to Far Cry 6, or if there's anything that they're. I mean, people who like the Far Cry games really like Far Cry games. Like, we know people personally who, just like Assassin's Creed, will play any Far Cry game that comes out because they feel good about the gameplay loop. It's something that they can just kind of turn their brain off and kill a bunch of people, and it's satisfying to them. And that's some people, that is what they're looking for from video games, and they want to experience that. And that's totally fine. It's not what I'm looking for necessarily, but I'd be curious to see if they're intending to make any major changes to the formula for this one. Yeah. But then I think that's pretty much it for Ubisoft Forward. There wasn't a lot going on. We kind of, I know we're a little bit running over time here. Bipol, how are you doing?
I am trucking.
You're trucking?
Okay. Along. Yeah.
Would you be open to staying a little longer?
Yeah. Do we have the last topic, I guess, being Fallout 76?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about Fallout 76. I would also like to use the bathroom really quickly. Can we budget for that? Okay. All right.
Yeah, we can budget for that.
Okay. All right.
We'll remove it in post.
Yeah, no, don't, trust me. I'm an expert. Okay, don't tell me how to run my fucking show.
Should I clap us out?
Yeah, clap us out.
And
perfect. Okay, all right.
How many claps do we need?
All right, we'll be right back. Yeah, this is perfect. Keep clapping. Keep clapping.
You can get a pizza out of them too.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think it's just about to come out.
I really gotta go to Japan. Just for this.
Just for this.
When people ask me why I'm visiting Japan, I'll be like, can you point me to your nearest microwave vending machine? Wow. Better than some pizza that I get in Chicago. Holy shit.
And they give you money.
I would tip that machine.
$9. That.
Are we ready?
Mm-hmm.
I'm ready.
And we're back. Thank you, Bipol, for clapping. That's very helpful for the edit. and we're here to talk about the least topical game imaginable, because we all
Sims
played it.
4.
Yeah, The Sims 4. What's your thoughts on the new expansion of The Sims 4, Bipol?
I think that it's actually an extremely topical game because we're all under quarantine, and Sims allows us to simulate what it would be like to be able to go outside again.
Can your Sims catch a cold?
They can get sick,
Yes,
yeah,
they can
indeed.
die.
Absolutely.
Can they infect other people in the house?
They
Oh,
can, yeah. So realistically, and I'm sure this has already happened, somebody has modded COVID into The Sims. Yeah, there's a COVID mod.
I can hear Bipol.
Yeah, Bipol's searching. Bipol is searching high and low for the
And
COVID
I
mod.
have indeed found it. I'll look at that later.
Save that for later.
So, we all got onto our Microsoft Game Pass for Windows personal computer accounts and discovered that Fallout 76 is available as a video game that you can play for free if you, for free, discounting the concept of paying for Windows Game Pass. And
Did they add it recently?
Yeah, very recently. And we all played it.
Yeah.
What?
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's all go through our initial impressions. Let's start. Bipol is our honored guest. Let's start with Bipol.
Sure. First few moments of the game are exactly as you would expect. Leaving the vault's always an exciting bit of a Fallout game. It really tells you a lot about what you may face, or it gives you what you need to know about yourself, who you are, why you were there.
Do you feel like this one was well done?
Not particularly, no. It felt like this initially when the game came out, everyone spoke about how lifeless it was because they didn't have any voiced characters, and I think that leaving the vault definitely gives you that impression. You're leaving there without... You're the last person out, like everyone else is left. It feels very isolating. And at a time like this, that's the last thing I want to feel.
Yeah.
But my feelings on it are not necessarily that good. Like, I think they've captured the modern Fallout gameplay. A lot of the key bindings are the same as Fallout 4, which is a game I'm playing through again for the upteenth time. But things feel sort of plasticky, and just none of the combat doesn't feel good. I mean, in Fallout 4, it doesn't necessarily feel good, but at least there's some weight to certain actions. All of this feels like Play-Doh and toothpicks, and it's buggy still after years. The game starts up as Project 76, which is weird. We had several problems trying to play together, which is the one thing you should do right in a game that is firmly based on its multiplayer component.
Yeah.
I think the crafting and the workshop seems interesting, but the amount of grinding it probably takes to build something worthwhile or interesting is way more time than I would want to spend in the game. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing that makes this game not that enjoyable is almost nothing to do with the actual content or bugs aside and all that stuff. It is the feel of this game. Like, you boot it up and everything just kind of feels wrong almost immediately. And that is not good. Like, that's not what you want. I mean, I think the most kind of upsetting part is that as somebody who doesn't like Fallout 4 that much personally, it feels like a weirder and worse version of that. Like, it doesn't even feel as good as Fallout 4 did. which
Yeah.
I mean, Fallout 4 gameplay wise was a step up, I think, for the franchise in terms of like responsiveness and shooting and minute to minute gameplay. Looting was made easier. Like all of those changes come over here and are certainly welcome, but even those things feel sluggish and delayed and less satisfying than they do in Fallout 4, which is
Yeah.
very strange. Sean, you had some you had some different problems.
Yeah, nearly everything about this is terrible. But the only fun that I've had with this has been like playing with you guys in the last like hour or so. It was okay, but even that was like a jittery mess most of the time for some reason. I don't know why, but I completely agree with him saying that everything feels like Play-Doh. Like I couldn't have come up with a better way of describing the feeling of it. But initially, even getting it to like start up was a nightmare. Like for whatever reason, the game doesn't save the character that you create while it's in the vault. You have to actually exit the vault for it to realize that you made something and save it, because my game crashed twice like after creating a character and like not exiting the vault yet. So on the third try, I just like did it as quickly as possible, didn't do anything in the vault, and like ran out. And then when I got out of the vault, the UI was non-existent. I couldn't. It was like how Bipol described it. I was like in the minimal HUD experience, only it was terrible.
Yeah,
And then
the realism version.
Exactly. And then I tried it again with you guys today, and it was like fine, but also like movement, like there was weird frame issues that I don't think it was our internet, because I don't have this issue when we play other multiplayer games, but it just felt like a jittery nightmare the whole time. I don't know. I'm hoping that maybe I'm just having bad luck on my end, but it's been terrible so far for me.
You brought up something we haven't even gotten into yet, which is the survival mechanics of the game, which is in the Fallout series as a survival mode, but it just feels so grindy and worthless. We're collecting all of this food in order to satiate our bodies, but it just seems like it's really a timer. Just like I can visualize the hydration meter as just a timer of the game being like, well, guess what? You're gonna have to go fill up some water bottles soon, and
oh yeah, totally.
It doesn't feel like a mechanic that's. We talked a little bit about Assassin's Creed. It feels like another mechanic that's driving me to buy some sort of enhanced version of the game that gives me, more hydration, or like some sort of item that is like the canteen. Like I don't know. It seemed more irritating than interesting, or it doesn't raise the stakes at all. It's a nuisance.
Yeah, I think
a lot of the systems seem that way.
It's interesting because I think the context of multiplayer changes how I feel about survival mechanics or durability mechanics. Like if it's a single player game, I'm a little more charitable about that stuff because it's part of like my character's progression in a way that ties it to my individual game and like the choices that I'll make. But in a multiplayer game like this, it feels almost punishing. Like it's preventing me from enjoying the game with my friends by being like, hey, every 5 steps that you sprint, you're gonna have to regen your sprinting your action points. Like, oh, okay, I guess I'll just take 3 times longer to cross the world, and then whenever I get wherever I'm going, I have to wait for my action points to regen before I can utilize them in a firefight or anything like that.
Yeah, it's just so exhausting. Like my endurance is drained as a human being playing the game.
Yeah.
Faster than the AP is consumed in the game.
Yeah.
And that takes like half a second of sprinting.
It's the evil within problem.
Yeah. I think. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, what I desire out of MMOs it's often the social aspect and to give us moments where interesting things can happen, but because the monsters just felt spongy and our guns didn't feel like anything, and I was just running around as a half-nude man with a machete, which should be a fun thing to do, and it didn't evoke that feeling. It seems half finished even years after it was released.
Yeah.
It's that problem that a lot of like multiplayer, like this happens with a lot of situations where the fun that you get out of it, you have to make with your friends. You have to create. Like I feel like we were, what we were doing in it that was fun had nothing to do with like the Fallout aspect of it. It was us creating our own fun within sort of the weird visuals and shit you find in the game.
Yeah. I think just like anything, I mean, something you play with your friends is automatically enjoyable on some level because it's with your friends, right? Like it's sort of cheating. I think the thing that makes this damning is that like the idea of Fallout as a multiplayer game should be a pretty easy win. Like the it seems like the systems and the mechanics are already there to make an enjoyable experience, but like they didn't do enough to translate it. Like I completed a quest that you guys were present for, and then because you guys weren't the team leader, it didn't count for you.
Yeah.
Which maybe, I mean, hey, I'll admit maybe we didn't notice something or we did something wrong in that sense, and that's the only reason that occurred that way. But like, that's like MMOs figured that out 10 years ago. I mean, like, World of Warcraft and kind of forthcoming games realize that people want to play with their friends, and if you complete a quest alongside someone, both of you should get the credit for it, right?
Yeah. I feel like no one wanted this game, really.
Well, people said they wanted multiplayer Fallout, but I don't think they wanted this.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been
not
like
an
rumblings
MMO
about.
Fallout.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Multiplayer Fallout is a very different. Like, give me a co-op Fallout. Give me like a 4-person Fallout, I guess. I don't know.
That was always how I felt. Like I really do still love like Fallout 3. Like New Vegas is my favorite one personally, but I've always felt that same way where like, there have been like rumblings about a Fallout MMO for a really, really long time. But for me, like I think what would make that interesting is just like playing a Fallout story like co-op. That's it. Like I never really needed any of that MMO stuff.
Yeah.
Or any of this like survival. Like this, they could put survival mechanics in this, and I think New Vegas had like a survival mode that was pretty interesting, but I don't remember if it. I don't think it worked like this. I don't quite remember that, but like the whole like food and drink meter thing is just. It's such a nuisance. Like I agree with Bipol. It feels like I'm just watching like a timer. It's not. I don't know. It doesn't do anything for me.
This is the only opportunity I've ever been able to talk about this game.
Yeah, I played this game.
Fallen Earth.
Yeah.
Which was an MMO like in 2008, and it was kind of billed as a Fallout-esque MMO, which there were many problems with this game. Many problems. And they tried to experiment with a lot of things, like kind of a first-person mode, and weird combat, but I really bring this up just to say, like, in trying to capture this world in an MMO format, I think just doesn't work. Like, there's a mixture of isolation that I require in the Fallout universe to really feel like it's Fallout.
Yeah.
Especially if you're playing with survival mode mechanics, like having to scavenge, having to even when I was looking at you and we both looked at a body and had different loot, like that's immediately jarring and strange. And I know that they've progressively made the game a little more arcadey with Fallout 4, and especially with 76. Like 76 is extremely arcadey and tongue-in-cheek and all about that kind of fun and games with your friends aspect.
Yeah.
But it's just so, it just doesn't feel right for me, and I honestly think I'm just going in the game with the wrong idea. I think I should see it as like a grindy MMO, free-to-play MMO, because that's what it feels like to me. and all of the Fallout parts just make it worse, I think.
Fallout, this is going to be somewhat controversial, maybe. I think Fallout, around the time that Fallout 4 came out, became window dressing for a bunch of game mechanics that are not necessarily integral to that franchise, right? I mean, you could maybe argue that that's true for 3 in New Vegas as well, but I think that Fallout 4 in particular showed a version of the apocalypse that is friendlier in mechanics, in narrative, in just how preoccupied the world is. Like there's a lot of people, and you're constantly running into people in Fallout 4. You can't fucking stop running into people. I mean, and I think it's just, game engines can handle more NPCs, and they have traders, and they want the world to feel alive, and there's a caravan, and there's, this, and oh look, it's the Brotherhood of Steel. Oh look, it's, all this shit. But like the apocalypse feels more lively than ever in Fallout games, and I think that's a problem that I've kind of already come to terms with. But I think the thing about Fallout 76 is that it's not really an MMO, and it's not really just a multiplayer Fallout game. It's like the worst of both. It just bothers all of the wrong mechanics.
And I'm not here to argue for Fallout 4 and the feeling of that civilization is coming back to the wasteland, but
yeah.
I will say in Fallout 76, even though there are players running around and even though there are NPCs, they feel like they don't actually exist in this world.
Oh, sure.
They feel like they've been plucked out of somewhere else and placed there. They feel like NPCs. I at least think there were certain characters in Fallout 4 or certain groups that felt like they should exist in this world at the time. And
sure.
Of course that's the case because this is a AAA game that was built with that narrative in mind. But that's what I want. That's my expectation when I come into a Fallout game. And not getting that is what creates this dissonance, I think. And then also adding all of the grindiness of an MMO, which I'm already dealing with in WoW. I could never enter a flow state in Fallout just because I feel like the mechanics are just so clunky. But in World of Warcraft, it's very easy for me to enter kind of a grindy flow state.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine what that would be like in Fallout. So, I don't know.
I think that they have become kind of obsessed with this idea of leaving the vault and going into this world, even though people that like these games are already kind of familiar with that feeling since they already did it in 3. And I think that maybe in this case, it probably just playing on what you said, I think it would have benefited if they just had you have the ability to start as some faction that is already pre-existing in that world, because there was some New Vegas mods that did that, but even the main New Vegas story, you're not coming from the vault, you're just somebody that exists here. And I think that maybe that could have helped a little bit with I don't know, that weird feeling to it all. And even with the story, it's just kind of odd that now it's oh, all these people from the vaults are coming into this land. It just doesn't feel like the original idea. I don't think that the idea was ever that people in the vaults wanted to leave or that it was a thing to be celebrated. They left out a necessity, and it's a weird, it kind of plays on that how oddly cheerful the world feels, which is definitely what they've committed to at this point. But yeah, I
think it's interesting. Bipol mentioned World of Warcraft, and there's I mean, I think what Sean said is interesting in that if they had leaned a little bit more into the MMO thing and were less concerned with the Fallout style narrative hooks, that going through character creation, being able to pick a faction or a starting location, or having something determine where you start. Not everybody has to start in the vault. You can if you want to, and if that's your backstory and blah blah blah, and your character class and that stuff. But you could also just start as a raider on X side of the map or something like that.
Or a ghoul.
That's the coolest part about WoW is back when it came out was you could start on a vastly you could start on a different continent than someone else was on. So.
And you brought up New Vegas, and the alternate start mod for New Vegas is really really good. And they the last time I played New Vegas, I think was earlier this year, and honestly, choosing the Great Con start, for example. Like the amount of work that they put in to ensure that the reputation you have with people or like where you are with the quest line makes sense is insane. And it definitely makes that game a lot more, well, not a lot more interesting, but incredibly replayable. But I do agree. I think something like that would make Fallout 76 way more interesting. If I could start off as a raider or what have you. I guess that's kind of like what we're getting into. We only played like 3 hours of content, and the first decision we were given, I guess, was sort of like, do you want to join this raider guild or do you want to help the civilization people at the bar?
Yeah.
So maybe they play more to this, but I'm just so unwilling to pick it up again with how clunky and annoying the system feels to me.
Totally. Completely agreed. Now, here comes the integral question before we close it out. Bipol, you were here. You recall, well, I say here, you were sitting at a coffee shop table when the infinite scale was born. You know of its uses.
Yep.
Tell me, how would you rate Fallout 76 on the infinite scale, just based on your initial impressions?
-2.
Holy shit. All right, Sean, what do you think?
-2 for sure. Maybe
Yeah.
even lower, honestly.
Yeah.
I want to give it. I'll probably. There's a part of me that wants to like give it more time and see if I'm maybe missing something, but my initial impressions have just been like.
I do think we'll play it some more. I think that is probably true. I intend to give it a little more time. I don't know if it's going to be like a ton, but I could see myself maybe a session or two more before, I mean, if it doesn't get a lot better, then that would probably just kind of be that, right? I'm with you guys. I mean, I might be a little more charitable and say like -1 to a 0, just because, I mean, for me, it's been mostly functional, if kind of like not that enjoyable. But I think in terms of like, in terms of the gameplay, it is about what I expected, just slightly worse. So I think I went in expecting like a 0, and -1 seems like a slight adjustment for that. So
this is kind of the beauty of Game Pass, is that if we do drop this entirely, I won't feel bad. I'll feel bad that I played a bad Fallout game, because I love Fallout so much, but it's not a big deal. At this point.
I just like they've dressed it up like a Fallout game. They've used all the words of a Fallout game, but it is not a Fallout game to me yet. It feels like we're playing what's that one zombie game that we were talking about playing that we never picked up?
Zombie game.
Yeah, it's like there are zombies, State of Decay.
Oh, sure.
I've never played State of Decay, but when we're like killing the ghoulish people, whatever they're called, it feels like we're playing that game that I've never played before. Like I'm just seeing that in my head as like we're clearing this house of zombies. It doesn't feel like Fallout. Even the raider feels like this plasticky guy who's walking around lost. The rad stags glitched out in the mountains. None of it feels like a living world.
Yeah.
Well, WoW I think captures that better, like, which makes sense because there are billions and billions of dollars invested in that. But of having like moments of characters constantly doing things in action, like they're guarding something, they're doing something. But we literally saw a single raider in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
Just walking around confused.
Well, this is a little bit facetious, but do you think that it really is like a money problem, or is this? I really don't feel that it is. Do you think that there is a world where this could have been like good, or was it always going to be this way?
I think that there's a version of this definitely that could have been enjoyable at the very least. I mean, bugs and brokenness aside, I think they just approached this without understanding what people wanted from the idea of this game, right? and I think it just points to like the wrong. It's not that it's not a money issue. It's not that they didn't have enough time or money or resources to make something that we enjoy. It's that somebody somewhere, multiple people most likely made the wrong decisions that led to this game kind of being the way that it is. Unfortunately.
And I mean, they had to build in patterns that make it unwieldy and annoying to people who want to play it. Like just the concept of having card packs. I know that the whole weight problems that they had in the initial thing where you had to be a preferred customer or whatever, even that, like, you only get dedicated servers if you're preferred. Like, they've done a lot of things, obviously, because this is a game that they want you to pay for. But before it was on Game Pass, like, people actually had to buy this game and, invest time into it. We didn't even have to do that. So I guess we're privileged in that case. But
yeah. Cool.
Yeah, there's
Go ahead.
There's so much. It felt like there was potential in this game, but after playing it, I don't have high hopes.
Yeah, it's disappointing in the most literal sense, which is that like it very much should have been better. It should at least be enjoyable. Because the baseline Fallout experience is enjoyable. Like as much as I do not like Fallout 4, that is a fun game to play. And this does not replicate any of that at all thus far. So
yeah, Fallout 4, I agree with you. Fallout 4 feels fun to play. I have my kind of issues with the story and stuff, but I can at least get in that and know that I'm gonna have a fun time playing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
So,
cool.
Hopefully State of Decay 2 feels better, because I don't know that I agree with your assessment of State of Decay 2 as being like Fallout 76. I think that game's probably better.
No, so when I say that, I freely admit that I've never played that game before, but just like when I'm killing zombies, my first thought was like, we're playing a zombie game. We're not playing a game in which the Brotherhood of Steel exists.
Sure, not necessarily a Fallout game. Yeah, that's fair. Cool. All right, guys. Well, I think that'll do it this time. Bipol, thank you for coming on and chatting with us. We would like to have you on again, because I think we like you. I don't know if that's like a weird and bold opinion, but I mean, I know some people have their problems with you, but
yeah, that's very true. I'll probably wait to see the general reaction from the audience, which who knows based on some of the shit that I said.
It's true.
But
I'll pass along the thoughts.
Yeah, if it's generally positive, this was fun.
Nice, good. Hopefully we'll have a better game to talk about at some point. But yeah.
Sea of Thieves.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe that'll be a thing.
Revisiting BioShock Infinite.
Oh God. Full circle. Thank you guys for listening, all four of you. And we will be back next week with another edition of the Infinite Scale Podcast Network. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
That was me. That was an applause. It was me clapping us out.
Yeah, I figured. That's why I was thanking you, because that's gonna be a really helpful.